Good afternoon and welcome to the bee yard. The fall rains have finally started after a long, hot and dry summer here in Michigan. And with the rains have come the fall flowers. The bees are busily at work taking advantage of summer's last hurrah. They seem almost frantic in their coming and going. They know there are only a few weeks left before settling into a long Michigan winter. As things wind down in the bee yard, we now have more time to spend in the workshop, tending to all of those long overdue projects. And that is a good thing, since time spent in the workshop is quality time. One project that a beekeeper should definitely put on their list is building their own beehive. It is not complicated. I can think of no better way to expand and extend your beekeeping journey than building your own equipment. Building your own beehive is easy on your budget, and you will end up with first-class stuff. In this series of videos, we will show you how to build a beehive, from the hive stand at the bottom to the telescoping cover at the top, and everything in between. It is a great winter project. So join us as we learn how to build a beehive in the beekeeper's workshop. Today's project, building the telescoping top cover. Smile, horses. I'm telling the horses to smile. This morning it was 10 below zero, and February will set a record low for this part of Michigan. With temperatures like this, it takes a while to warm up the shop. The woodpile has taken a hit, and come spring, we'll have to once again hook up those horses and get out in the woods. We started this series of videos with the idea that building a beehive is a great winter project. Life, however, has a way of getting in the way, and more time has passed than we would have otherwise wanted. So it is high time that we continue this series with today's project, building the telescoping top cover. In a beehive, the telescoping top cover sits on the very top of the hive above the inner cover. It is the roof of the beehive. The telescoping hive cover is what keeps the weather and elements out of your beehive. The telescoping part of the name is because the cover has sides that fit down over the outside of the hive body. It telescopes over the top of the hive. This feature helps prevent the top cover from blowing off the hive and keeps the hive weather tight. The telescoping top cover has 4 side rails, big enough to slide over the hive bodies, and an inside cover made out of some sort of plywood. The whole thing is clad in an aluminum cover that folds over the edges. The telescoping top cover is simple in design and simple to build. Or, on the other end of the scale, you can go fancy, such as the top covers on these garden hives that I built. But most of us will use the standard telescoping cover in our bee yards, and this is what we will be building today. The telescoping top cover is basically a simple frame made from a 1x4 pine board. The inside cover is made out of 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch plywood or OSB. And the aluminum cover is made from coil stock, which is available from any lumber yard. Top covers are 22 inches long and 3 1/4 inches high, although the exact height depends on the thickness of the plywood used for the inside cover. There are 3 different widths depending upon if you are using 5-frame, 8-frame, or 10-frame equipment. The free, downloadable plans have all of the dimensions for this project. We'll give you the web link at the end of this video. The overall size of the top cover is quite a bit bigger than the hive bodies in order for the rails to extend down around the sides of the hive and also have a bit of room between the rails and the sides of the hive. The length of the hive body is 19 7/8 inches. Call it 20 inches. and a top cover will be 22 inches long, 2 inches longer than the hive body. This works out well since the coil stock for the aluminum is 24 inches wide and will end up with a 1-inch overhang of the aluminum on both ends of the hive cover. The width of the top cover will also be 2 inches wider than the hive body we are using. You will probably notice that the commercial top covers have a rail that is typically in the neighborhood of a couple inches deep. However, I find that this sometimes is not quite enough. During the course of the year, you will probably be adding components to the top of the hive, such as an inner cover and maybe a shim or a foam insulating board. As things stack up, the narrow rim of the commercial top may not completely cover these additions and the top may slide off. An extra deep side rail will really come in handy. Today I'm going with a side rail that is 3 inches high. Being able to modify a commercial design, such as adding a bit to the height of the side rail, is one of the many advantages of building your own equipment. In today's project, I will be building a top cover for an 8-frame hive, because that is what I use in my bee yard. For an 8-frame hive, the top cover is 22 inches long, 15 3/4 inches wide, and 3 3/8 inches high, including the plywood cover. The downloadable plans for this project contain the dimensions for the other common sizes. Now let's get started. The easiest method to join the frame is a simple butt joint. Because the plywood cover will be glued and nailed to the top of the frame, the strength of a butt joint will not be a major issue. However, we always want to minimize the amount of exposed end grain, so we will be using a rebate joint. This joint only has half the exposed end grain as does the butt joint. Since rot usually starts at the end grain, a rebate joint will prolong the life of the cover. Also, the rebate joint has more glued surface, so this joint is a bit stronger than a simple butt joint. We will make the frame out of a 1x4 pine board, cut into 4 pieces and then ripped to a 3-inch width. The 2 boards for the side rail are always 22 inches long. The length of the end rails, however, depend on the style of the hive body you are using. The end rail length for a 5-frame hive is 10.5 inches. For an 8-frame hive, the length is 15 inches. And for a 10-frame hive, the length is 17.5 inches. Since we are making a top cover for an 8-frame hive, we need 2 boards cut from the 1x4 that are 15 inches long and 2 boards that are 22 inches long. After the sides are cut to length, we rip each to a width of 3 inches. On the table saw, I have moved the fence to 3 inches from the inside of the blade. Notice that I am using push sticks to keep my fingers safely away from the blade. Once all 4 sides are ripped to width, we can move on to making the corner joints. To make a rebate joint, we need to cut a notch, or a rabbet, on the ends of both side rails. The rabbet is 3/8 inches deep and 3/4 inches wide. When assembling, we will glue and nail the end rail into this notch, thus creating a rebate joint. I'll make the shoulder cut of the rebate joint using the table saw. First, raise the blade to 3/4 of an inch and then move the fence to 3/8 of an inch from the face of the tenon jig to the inside of the blade. Next, clamp the side rail securely to the tenon jig, making sure the board is square to the table. Then run it through. Flip the board end for end and make a similar cut on the other end of the side rail. Notice that I am marking the outside face of the board. We need to avoid confusion when we make the cheek cut in the next step. And of course we do the same cuts on the second side rail board. And that's the shoulder cut of the rebate joint. To complete the cheek cut, we don't need the tenon jig. Lower the blade to 3/8 of an inch and move the fence to 3/4 of an inch from the outside of the blade. After a while, you will be able to just eyeball the correct position of the fence. Keep the board square to the blade with the miter gauge and make your cut. Be sure the marked side of the board is facing down. Rotate the board end for end and complete the cut on the other end. And don't forget to do the same operation on the second side rail. And be sure you have the marked side of the board facing down. And that's how you make a rebate joint. The cover is made from some type of sheet stock, such as 1/4 inch, 3/8 or 1/2 inch plywood. You could use a piece of OSB, which is a bit less expensive than plywood, and I have seen inside covers made from hardboard. However, the inside of the top cover will have a lot of moisture condensing on it, so I recommend going to something that is durable. Hardboard won't stand up to the moisture even if you paint it. OSB is okay, but I find it does not last as long as the plywood. So I'm going with exterior grade plywood. Don't use treated plywood, which is impregnated with chemicals that you definitely do not want in the hive. Plywood is a bit more expensive than OSB, but you will more than get it back because of the longer life of the top cover. The sheet for the cover has the same size as the footprint of the frame. The length is always 22 inches. The width, however, depends on the style of the hive body you are using. For a 10-frame hive, the cover is 18 1/4 inches. For an 8-frame hive, the cover is 15 3/4 inches wide. And for a 5-frame hive, the width is 11 1/4 inches. For our 8-frame hive, the cover piece is 22 inches long and 15 3/4 inches wide. When cutting the plywood from a large sheet, I always make a rough cut a bit larger than the final size, and then use the table saw to get to my final dimensions. I end up with better, straighter edges this way. We are now ready to assemble the frame and cover piece. Before the glue up, dry fit everything together and check the assembled dimensions. Next, glue and nail together all 4 side rails. I'm using Franklin's Exterior Tight Bond. Make sure all of the mating surfaces are covered with glue. Any gaps in the glue weaken the joint. Then nail the frame together, carefully checking for square. I'm using 1.5 brads in the air gun. Try not to use nails that are so big that they split the wood. And with that, we are now ready for the cover. To install the plywood cover, lay down a bead of glue around the perimeter of the plywood. Plywood usually has a good side and a not so good side. I like to put the good side facing down, so that is the side that gets the glue. And don't forget to glue the top of the frame. Notice that the not so good side of the plywood, the side with all of the knots, is facing up. Then nail or staple the cover to the side rails. I'm using 3/4 inch staples, although small nails or brads work just about as well. Looks good to me. Some shop enthusiasts may be hesitant about a project which requires bending metal for the cover. This is best done with a large metal brake, which is a contraption made specifically for bending metal sheets, and not the sort of tool most of us have in our workshops. However, a perfectly adequate job can be done using an inexpensive hand brake, also called a hand seamer. A hand seamer is essentially a heavy-duty pliers with a wide gripping head. It sort of reminds me of a hammerhead shark. With a little practice, you'll be making sheet metal bends with a hand seamer like a pro. The metal cover is made from aluminum trim coil, which is available from your local lumber yard. The sheet of aluminum for the cover is 2 inches longer and 2 inches wider than the footprint of the frame. The length is always 24 inches. The width, however, depends upon the style of the hive body you are using. For a 10-frame hive, the cover width is 20 1/4 inches. For an 8-frame hive, the cover is 17 3/4 inches wide. And for a 5-frame hive, the width is 13 1/4 inches. Cutting the aluminum sheet is easy. All you need is a utility knife. Simply measure the width you need, strike your line with the carpenter square, then score the sheet a couple of times with the knife. Bend the sheet back and forth and it will snap right off. Now we get to the fun part, bending the aluminum sheet so that it folds down over the edge of the top cover. The hardest part of this job is making the corners. We don't want to cut the aluminum and make the corners that way. Rather, we will make a pleat in the corner, then fold it back against the side for a weather-tight and neat-looking corner. Here's how. This graphic shows a corner detail where we will be bending the aluminum cover. You might want to trace these lines on the bottom of the aluminum sheet as a guide. You will have reference lines parallel and 1 inch from each edge. Also notice the diagonal line in the corner. This diagonal line marks the fold for the pleat necessary to make the corner. The lines along the sides are done, and I'm using the rafter square to make the diagonal reference lines on the corners. It is a good idea to put the top cover on the aluminum and make sure everything looks right. To get started, begin on one side and use the hand seamer to make a shallow bend, say halfway or 45 degrees. Work your way along the side making these shallow bends. Then go back over, increasing the bend until you get a full 90-degree edge. Before doing the opposite side, check your reference line against the top cover. Then repeat what you just did and make the bend on the second end of the cover. When that is done, again check for fit. Okay, now we have 2 sides done and we are ready to move on to the third. The first thing we do is make a shallow bend on the corner diagonal, which we made earlier. This starts the pleat. Now work your way down the side. Notice how that corner is starting to take shape? Now to make the pleat. Pinch the 2 sides together and use the hand seamer to make a sharp, tight-fitting fold. Where the 2 sides meet, there will be a triangular tab sticking out. This is the pleat. To finish the corners, slip the aluminum sheet back over the top cover and bend each pleat back against the edge. Use the hand seamer to complete the corners with a nice, crisp fold. We do the same thing on the last remaining side. Start with the 2 diagonal bends, and then work your way along the side, completing the edge. Once all the corners are done and everything looks good, just slip the aluminum cover over the top and then tighten up any of the corner pleats if necessary. And the job is done. Our last step in this project is to install the aluminum cover. Notice that I have taken time to paint the top cover both inside and out with a primer coat and 2 top coats of the best latex paint I can find. I put too much time, effort, and money into the woodenware, and I want it to last as long as possible. And a good paint job on all of the surfaces is a step toward this happy place. To install the aluminum cover, it is simply a matter of slipping it over the assembled top cover and stapling it in place. Staple on the sides of the aluminum cover and not through the top. I am using 1/2-inch staples, but you could also use short aluminum trim nails. And with that last staple, the project is done. And there you have it, a telescoping cover for your beehive. This video completes the series on how to build a beehive. We have taken you through building the hive stand, all the way to the telescoping top cover, and everything in between. I hope you have time to check out some of the other project videos we have on our channel, and check back as we are working on more. Enjoy your bees. They are one of the wonders of nature, and keeping bees is a true privilege. Hope to see you later in the Beekeeper's Workshop.
Who hosted that?
Third one.